So ons gesels nou van silwer na silverdiere. En dit is Dr. Zimmermann. Hy's 'n veearts en ongelooflike werk wat hulle doen en ons wil 'n bietjie uitvind ook die beskerming van ons wildlewe en dan ook wat COVID gedoen het in sandparke en so aan. So good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yes, before we start chatting about this year, just a little bit of background about yourself. What an interesting CV, and you've worked from the Northern Cape, now in Eastern Cape, or Western Cape. It's just fantastic all over Africa. So just a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Natal on a dairy farm, and I suppose I always had a sort of love for the wildlife and for the environment, having grown up in a sort of in an environment that is in the wild basically. That is my sort of background. I always had a passion growing up in Natal. I suppose in those days there was also a lot of work going on with rhino conservation. The days of Ian Player with the Natal Parks Board, they were doing a lot of capturing of rhino and basically saving the rhino from extinction. So I suppose that was my sort of exposure to wildlife and why I wanted to become a vet in the early days.
Yes. Dr. Zimmermann, good morning. My name is Francois, and you are so involved with conservation as well. So I just want to know, how's the field of veterinary science and conservation related?
I suppose as veterinarians, we are sort of trained to deal with companion animals, so mainly animals such as dogs, cats, and horses, and also production animals. But working in wildlife and conservation, you're dealing more with wild animals, obviously, and you're dealing more with populations. You're not dealing with individual animals. So it is a little bit different, but it's related in that you're dealing with animals. Okay. I suppose in conservation, we more doing, we're trying to maintain ecosystem processes and protecting biodiversity, not just the individual animals. So you're looking at populations. And with the human population nowadays, a lot of these wildlife areas have become fragmented. And we've got to try maintain those processes by mimicking processes such as migration and dispersion between parks and between protected areas.
What I find fascinating, if we stay with conservation and science, is your own experience. I mean, you worked from elephants, like you say, rhinos, penguins, and it's the science of, just identify problems. So, for you, your favorite animals to work with, I mean, it's very difficult, but it's so wild, from penguins to elephants.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the stuff you learn as a veterinarian, you extrapolate it to wildlife. Each species is different. I mean, working with black rhino and white rhino are completely different. How they respond to drugs and that is very different. So you do need to get a feel and know what species you're working with. And I think that's one of the important things with reintroductory biology. I mean, for a project to be successful, you need to have a good understanding of the species that you're working with, its ecological needs. Is it a solitary animal or does it need companionship? Is it a herd animal? So each species, as you say, is very different. And I must say, I'm fortunate to be working with the national parks, working in that conservation environment. You also get exposed to different species such as birds. We've got marine protected areas under our sort of management. And over the years, I've got involved with shark conservation. I've worked a lot with African penguins. We've got islands out in Algoa Bay, Bird Island, St. Croix, where we've got one of the remaining African penguin populations. And I think we often sort of focus on the big species, your charismatic species, but those smaller species are just as important. It's also part of our biodiversity and what we're trying to protect. So that's been an awesome experience over the years.
And then just a quick question, we've got two more segments, is just, I mean, you were involved with moving rhino from South Africa to deeper into Africa. And are you not worried about our national parks as a continent? There's a lot of people doing great work.
Well, how do you mean? Yeah, look, I think there is a lot of great work, and there's a lot of organizations out there that are doing great work across Africa and across the world. Obviously, it's very important to try to protect our heritage. And, a lot of these areas, the animals have become locally extinct, and we're trying to mimic that process of reintroduction, of dispersion. I mean, we're quite fortunate in South Africa that we've still got a healthy wildlife population. Although saying that, I think we also starting to be impacted on by poaching and by human needs and greeds, basically. So, but we are in a position that we can sort of help supplement other populations, other African countries, and I think it's important that there is that collaboration between countries. I mean, animals don't have borders. We have sort of put man-made borders in there and restrictions on them by saying this is our country, that's your country, whereas the landscape needs to be continuous for wild animals to carry on existing. So I think it is important that we're involved in these projects.
Ons gaan 'n bietjie later gesels. So Dr. David Nerdens gaan nie oor die Wilderness Warriors en dan ook wat Salwa doen is die Suid-Afrikaanse Veearts Assosiasie. Dis so 'n bietjie later. Maar ons gesels vanoggend met Dr. David Zimmermann, Veearts, en hy is baie betrokke by die sandparke. So good morning again, David.
Morning. How are you doing?
I just want to find out, you also called wilderness warriors. And what's the reality of South Africa's wildlife and conservation thereof? And I realized all of a sudden, the past years, it feels like a war zone as well. You can't just be in the veld and think it's just a lovely job. It's really dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially for the guys on the ground. I mean, the rangers, they out there, they on the front line all the time, and I mean, they put in their life at stake every day, going out there and protecting our wildlife. And I think it's the reality of the situation is it can be very depressing. It can be a very heartbreaking environment to work in. I mean, I think for most people, they'll go to the national parks and they see the wildlife, and it's beautiful. I mean, we've got one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I've traveled a lot, and it takes a lot to beat South Africa. But it's just so sad to see what's happening, on the front line when you know the reality of the situation, the rhino getting poached. And for the rangers out there, I mean, they're doing an awesome job on a daily basis. And I suppose we all passionate about the environment in which we work, and we all trying to just, protect that for future generations. I want my children, my grandchildren to be able to experience that as well, to be able to go to Kruger National Park or any of the national parks for that matter. I mean, they're all beautiful. They're all protecting a small part of our biodiversity, which is essential for our well-being as a human race. So we need to have that environment. It's what sustains us.
Yeah, David, it's amazing the work that you do. I read through a little short article of all the work that you do, and it's just amazing to see the vast variety of stuff that you're involved in. And you just mentioned that it's important for our natural heritage to be, it's important to keep that for our children, for future purposes as well. It's so sad to see what's happening in nature, but it's also amazing to see what's being done, especially by you guys, that's Nature Warriors. Maybe tell us a bit more about the South African Veterinary Association and how they support you guys in the work that you do.
Yeah, well, as veterinarians, I mean, we working in a conservation organization. We actually fall under the Department of sort of Environmental Affairs, but we actually answer to the Department of Agriculture as a profession. And the South African Veterinary Association obviously falls under the Department of Agriculture as well. But they're very prominent in promoting the health and welfare of animals, and not just domestic and production animals, also wildlife. So within the South African Veterinary Association, we've also got a wildlife group, or specialist group, where there's veterinarians working in the wildlife field, or even just with an interest in wildlife and conservation can be involved with the wildlife group. So they are essential in promoting that collaboration between vets with the interest in wildlife. There's also other groups within the South African Veterinary Association, which I'm involved with. The Animal Ethics and Welfare Committee is a committee of the SAVA, which plays a very important role in looking after the welfare and ethics of how we as humans deal with animals, sentient beings as part of the environment. And those welfare issues are very important, especially in wildlife, I suppose, in any of the sort of animal professions. But in wildlife, I mean, we are exposed to a lot of ethical conundrums, if I can say that. The poaching. On one hand, the people that are doing the poaching on the ground are just trying to make a living. They're trying to put food on the table for themselves. So there's sort of, but then as you go higher up in the tiers, you've got the guys that are just there for the greed. They're just there to make money. They want to just better their lives, I suppose, and it's like an ego thing. The end users don't really understand. They've completely disconnected from the environment. So these are all sort of ethical issues of how we as a human race, how we interact with the environment and just our surroundings. And I think there's a lot of important issues there. And as I say, from a welfare point of view, I think it goes back to the environment is what sustains us. If the environment collapses, the human race and will collapse as well.
Exactly.
A last question. We've seen with COVID, it was as if nature took a big breath. Could you see it in a medical and a scientific way just in our wildlife in South Africa, with not people being there, no cars there, and even safer?
Well, I was fortunate during the sort of lockdown. We were still involved with work out at Addo National Park, and just going out there to the parks and being able to drive around there. It was sort of for the first time in the middle of the day you're able to drive, and there's no other people there in the park. It's just you basically with the wildlife, and you could see how the animals responded. Suddenly, the main tar roads and the dirt roads was there. They had. They were allowed to, that was their paths. They weren't sort of had to get off for vehicles moving past it. And you could see the elephant population there. It was actually amazing going down to Hapur and just seeing them enjoying the water with no other people, with no humans around, basically. They were in the sort of parking lot there, just cavorting and playing, and they just seemed to be a lot more relaxed. And you could also see it, I don't know, maybe it's just the air was a lot clearer. There was no pollution, and animals just seemed to be a lot more relaxed. But saying that, I think, I mean, diseases play an important role in ecosystems. We can't do without ecosystems. When populations get too big, something's got to give at some stage, and you will get these sort of population collapses in a natural environment. So it's been amazing to see that side of COVID-19, but obviously there's a lot of negative impacts as well for us as humans.
Sure.
But for wildlife, it's actually been a little bit of a blessing in disguise in certain respects.
Great.
Yeah.
Dr. David, thank you so much for your time. And again, thank you for what you're doing for nature. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good day.